Today on Spotlight, our interview with Rutgers University political science professor, Dr. Leonard Cole. As one of this country's experts on bioterrorism, he'll discuss his brand new book. What can America learn from it? Professor Leonard Cole of Rutgers University, our guest today on Spotlight. Dr. Cole, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure having you. Pleasure having you in Detroit and on Spotlight.
Thrilled to be here. Thank you.
You have a new book, Terror, How Israel Has Coped and What America Can Learn. Why this particular book at this particular time?
Well, part of it goes into what I've been doing in the past. I've written a lot about bioterrorism issues, biological weapons, chemical weapons. After 9/11 and then after the anthrax attacks, I became more concerned generally about American security and safety. And I said, where better to look for help or advice because of their experience than the Israelis, you know, especially since the year 2000, what the Palestinians called the Intifada, or the uprising, has meant literally hundreds and hundreds of attacks, terrorist attacks against innocent civilians. How did the Israelis manage this? How do they survive as a society and still have their kids go to school, go to the doctors, do the ordinary things? And also, what particular efforts on the ground to help prevent terrorism and how to cope with it have they gone through that we can learn from in the U.S.?
In your book, you talk about Israel having what many people consider the gold standard of security as it relates to coming in and out of the country, coming through El Al airport, et cetera, et cetera. Would you agree with that?
Look, there are a lot of things that the Israelis do that are just not transferable to the United States. On the other hand, let's look at what we can learn from them. And if you want to talk about airport security, they don't depend as much as we do on the kind of standard fix where you take your shoes off, you take your belt off, and you go through the machinery.
Right.
They spend a little bit more time with some people by talking to them.
Yeah, and I found that rather intriguing, that it's the questions they seem to ask that tell them more than searching through different bags necessarily.
Well, you're absolutely right. Not that you shouldn't be searching bags as well and putting them through X-ray machines, but I think that they're more selective about whom they inconvenience, if that's the word. You know, we're all inconvenienced. We're getting used to it. You go through a line, you stand behind people, you wait for everyone to take their shoes off, pass the whole thing through. You don't have that kind of disrobing generally in Israel, certainly not when you go through their major airport. But they'll have somebody sit and talk to you, and they'll say, tell me how long you've been here, where do you intend to go, where was your father born? They ask you questions that they would hope that you would give a fairly easy and quick response to. And if you have trouble answering some of these, they might spend a little more time with you and say, so why this and why that? And for the most part, it works. The Israelis have not had a security problem with their airline or with their airport, certainly in 38 years that I'm aware of.
In the book, you talk about the fact that one person said in Israel, they profile with a capital P, and they aren't apologetic as a result of it. Talk a little bit about that and how that has worked for them, and whether or not you think that is transferable to the United States, because here profiling is pretty much considered a bad word. You don't do it, it's illegal, and it'll get you in a lot of trouble legally to be able to do that.
You're absolutely right. I live in New Jersey, I teach in New Jersey, and New Jersey is exceptionally sensitive through their law enforcement up and down the state, through all of the people who might be interested in looking for our security concern. Very concerned and sensitive about the idea of profiling. Well, let me start about the Israelis by saying they are concerned about civil liberties, civil rights. They don't want to see any individual's freedom and opportunity to go here or there curtailed any more than we do. They have been targeted by terrorists far more frequently, as we all know, than Americans. They're more willing to curtail some of their open and individual rights to the extent that profiling is acceptable to them. Look, if there's a person who fits a pattern, and I don't want to cite Muslims or Islamic people in particular because the overwhelming majority, I'm fully aware, are peace-loving, they're not terrorists, they're not interested in terrorism, I would hope, for sure, across the board, but there are exceptions. disproportionately, the number of people that the Israelis have had to contend with in terms of terrorism, and unfortunately in Western Europe and the US as well, have been people who claim to speak for Islam, who are called Islamists or extremists. And so they're going to be more careful with somebody who has a history of, say, coming from one or two of the Arab countries that have a stamp on their passport from if they've ever been to Jordan or if they've been to Egypt. They might get a little more careful questioning than somebody who's been to Israel 15 times and has no such history. In the US, we are different in terms of what we're willing to accept, so we're less likely to accept profiling, and so we work around it. That would not be particularly transferable then from terms of what the Israelis do into what we would manage in terms of a security arrangement.
What's the biggest lesson that you think we as Americans can learn from your book?
Well, from the overall book, I'd say you get a serious lesson about Israeli resilience. How does a society continue in normal activities and pretty much with the same value systems we have in the U.S.? You know, they have a Supreme Court that can, in effect, negate rulings of their parliament, just as we have in our country with Congress. Mm-hmm. They have a free press, we have a free press, open elections in both countries. How does a society survive and get through and still maintain civil liberties and the kinds of values we have? You go and you can see through the Israeli experience how they do this. That kind of resolution is very important for resiliency, how you cope. Then there are many individual lessons, I won't go through them all, about what the Israelis do to help respond to a terrorist attack. If I can give you just one quick example.
Okay.
They have managed the system through drills and exercises that they know that after, say, there's a suicide bombing in a cafe, they can begin to get individual victims to hospitals literally within minutes. And at the end of 1 hour's time, 90% of people who need hospitalization are already in hospitals.
So the emergency preparedness system is a lot swifter.
Well, we haven't had that experiment here other than 9/11, but in London, to give you an example, you know, in the year 2005, they did have 3 bombs go off, suicide bombers, in the metro system, as well as a bus bombing. And it wasn't until 1 hour later that the first victim was hospitalized. So the difference between what the people in London and England were able to do compared to what the Israelis are able to do was vast. And I suspect that in our country, in fact I know in our country, some of our hospitals and local enforcement people are in good shape. They're prepared, they exercise, they do well. Many of our communities do not have that kind of standard, though. It's very spotty in the United States.
Final question, and unfortunately time is always our worst enemy. We know that America has changed since 9/11. Do you believe that we are now a safer country and a more secure country as a result of what we learned coming out of 9/11?
That is probably the most important question that anyone can ask. I'm glad you gave it to me. I can't give you a simple answer. I can say that for sure, in many ways, we are better prepared. We're more sensitive to the issue of terrorism. We're more knowledgeable. Hospitals, local police forces, fire departments are better prepared. And yet, we do know that there are people who want to do us ill. There's no 100% guarantee to protect yourself against terrorism.
Sure.
And we can do better to have a more uniform preparedness capability. We're not there yet. The Israelis can help us get there faster to the standards that we need to.
All right. Dr. Leonard Cole, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Good luck with your book. The book, once again, is Terror, How Israel Has Coped and What America Can Learn. And it's not hard for people to be able to track it down, I'm sure. All right, and we'll put information on the screen so people can get information on how to get it if they're interested in reading it. And certainly it's food for thought.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Action News at Noon is next.